If that was something that was to be considered, I would think it would be a huge step forward just to do this for the state legislative districts. But we are far from even getting that done right now. We've made some progress this year, and the clock is ticking. So we've got to move this a little bit more quickly down the field. But right now, that's not the sole stumbling block. The issue is really educating my colleagues about the need to do this and the importance of doing this. And interestingly, what we're seeing as time passes is more and more of my colleagues have had to overcome a gerrymandered process like Hakeem Jeffries or like Gianaris, who has a similar story prior to his election. And they've seen the reverse of this. They've seen the discrimination against themselves from a political perspective. And the support is growing and growing. Mayor Koch's effort's important. He's really shown a spotlight on this. We've had a number of editorial boards, probably most prominently the New York Times has been on this since the bill was first introduced 5 years ago. And of course all the good government groups from Blair Horner at Knightburg to Citizens Union to the rest have been beating the drum on this for a long time. We're finally getting to a point of critical mass. And I think that's largely due to the timing. If we don't pass something soon, we're going to run out of time to have a commission set up in time to do the kind of work that needs to be done.
Right.
And the gubernatorial election is also relevant in the sense that the incoming governors, whoever they may be, looks like it is likely to be Andrew Cuomo, if you ask me, right, at least right now.
Democrat.
A Democrat. But I believe all the candidates have pledged to not support a gerrymandered process.
They have, that's true.
And the governor would have to sign any redistricting legislation the legislature
How do you deal with legal issues like the Voting Rights Act and minority-majority districts and other things? And also, I mean, this is not free. I mean, this is actually an expensive process. I mean, how much would it cost? Is there a mechanism in your bill for paying for this and for hiring the kind of experts who manipulate the computer programs and come up with this kind of thing?
Well, the expense is already being borne. It's just being borne within the legislature right now. So I don't see any added expense to the state from having a separate group of people who doesn't have the same motivations as the legislators.
Well, they wouldn't get paid, is what you're saying.
The commission members would not get paid.
Okay.
But would they need to hire outside consultants and experts? Possibly, but that's already being done as well. So I don't see that as adding an additional cost on top of that. As for the legal issues you raised, the Minority Rights and Voting Rights Act considerations are important. We don't have the ability as a state to overrule the requirements set out in the Voting Rights Act to begin with.
Doesn't Justice have to approve?
Yes.
It does? Okay.
Yes, of course it does. And just to be extra careful, because we've heard these concerns from people who are concerned about minority representation, as I am, as we all are, there is a provision in the bill that specifically says nothing that will come out of this legislation can infringe in any way upon minority representation or the requirements of the Voting Rights Act.
So what's the drop-dead time for passage if, in fact, you're on this timeline and it takes, the census numbers will come out, you know, the 2010 census, it's actually finished now, if I'm not mistaken, and so the numbers are going to be coming out soon. How much time does an independent commission need? And then you need to pass a bill, say what, before the end of this year?
Ideally, although the drop-dead deadline, the point in the bill, and we can get into some of the details of how it would work because there's a multi-tiered process that's involved in this. But the first plan from the commission must be submitted to the legislature by May of next year. So ideally by the fall, by the end of this year, I suppose if we're really up against it, we can get away with doing it in the beginning of next year, and then the commission would really have its work cut out for it in just a few short months. But we need it to happen so that the first plan is submitted in May. The way the bill works, because of the requirements of the state constitution, the legislature has the final say on the redistricting plans. To do it otherwise would require a constitutional amendment for which we don't have time right now because it would need to pass two separately elected legislatures. And so the way we've structured it is the commission will present a plan to the legislature starting in May. The legislature can approve it or reject it, but without amending it. So they would either have to take the commission's plan as is.
What if they reject it? Then what happens?
Well, then it goes to a second round. And so the commission would take the reasons, the legislature would present its reasons for rejecting it. The commission would come up with a second plan, and that second plan would also have to be voted up or down without change. If that's rejected as well, then on the third try, the legislature has the ability to amend the plan and essentially do things the way they're done now, but there's no way to escape that without changing the Constitution. And what's important to remember is you see the public pressure around this issue right now, and what we've seen in other states that have followed this model is the pressure is so great on the legislature when the plans are presented. It's very hard for them to then reject a plan for the petty political purposes that we've seen in the past.
Okay, I foresee a bloody war. I'm sorry, do you not? I mean, it just seems to me that every step of the way there's going to be a fight.
Well, things are done not because they're easy, but because they're hard if they're done right. And so this is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. It's been difficult to get it this far, but it's something worth doing because all week you're hearing the horror stories that a gerrymandered process brings about, and we're finally at the point where we're beginning to reform a process that's been in need of reform for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's true, and there's some really fascinating stories that are coming out, and we'll be talking to you more, I'm sure. Assemblyman Mike Gianaris, thanks very much.
Thank you, Liz.